hope you're doing well. This is my last recording through here in Portland, so I hope you've enjoyed this view behind me. We'll see what my next location looks like. So let's just hop right in. So over Thanksgiving, my wife and I decided to watch a bunch of horror movies or shows. We watched, I guess Stranger Things isn't really terrifying anymore, but they are kind of horror. They're horror adjacent or have horrible, monstrous things in them. So I watched Stranger Things and Frankenstein. Like we binge watched the entire Stranger Things first volume. Why would we watch these during the holiday? That makes sense. Especially Frankenstein. So after we watched Frankenstein, my wife asked if I'd read the book or not. I hadn't. So I decided it was time to pick up and read it. I was also inspired to pick it up because of this Tun Chi video here, where he digs into the 1818 Frankenstein in very, very minute details. He will, his video is an hour long, and he talks about very specific things in a way that I would say he is definitely respecting in praise of nothing and focusing his attention correctly. Overall there's a lot of differences between the Guillermo del Toro movie and the book. Overall, it's the broad strokes are the same. The main framing device of the story is the same. Victor Frankenstein being found by a captain on the North Pole. He's rescued and tells his life stories. And there's also like the creature stories in it as well. But in Guillermo's movie, the creature tells it rather than Frankenstein reading the creature's words. There are some other parallels, but there's some things that are different, and I think they mostly make sense within the context of the story, which is fine. Art requires changes. One of the characters that is killed in the book is a 5-year-old. I can kind of understand why Del Toro didn't want to have a 5-year-old be killed. This book is beautifully written. Shelley does an amazing job really just writing beautifully. Her prose is almost poetic. If there is a more extravagant word to use to describe something, she will always use it, and it's really interesting because she really digs into some of the differences in nature and science and industrialization. You can kind of think of this book as, in the way that Tolkien kind of wrote like the Shire as being pre-industrialization and like the Sauron being industrialization. You can kind of think of different aspects of this book as the Industrial Revolution and pre-industrial revolution. And this story takes place in the late 1700s, but this book is heavily influenced by the Luddite Revolution. It's really clear. And this book is through and through a romantic book. You can tell that by the language. You can tell that by the drama that's in the story, the way that everything is cranked up to 11 in a lot of ways. It was written during the Romantic period, so that's what I mean by it being a romantic book. There is little to no actual romance in the book, though. Frankenstein is an incredibly dramatic person. It is almost comical how dramatic he is. He has incredible flights of fancy. He has incredible mood swings. If I was to diagnose him, I would say that he's like bipolar, because he has manic and depressive periods, and the swings are wild, and the swings are so bad that he gets physically ill where he might actually die. Where he's near death, and that gets to the point where even emotionally devastating events cause him to get like pneumonia or something like that. I think the interesting thing is the book allows him a lot of this, but some of the other characters are not allowed to have this at all. And this is clearly a sort of privilege that Shelley gives Frankenstein, and I think that this is kind of, if you look at the Silicon Valley type of like Elon Musk is almost a caricature of Frankenstein. He's mercurial, he is arrogant, and there's a lot of similarities there. So you could argue that Frankenstein is the prototype that the Silicon Valley folks are in the same mold. Frankenstein is really privileged generally. He's able to go to college, which during the time was not heard of very much, like in the early 1700s. He's also able to purchase books really easily, which also would have been expensive at the time. And he's also able to just do his research. Like, he has money to do research for years on end without really worrying about money. He's also given a period of 2 years to just go fuck off and travel before he gets married, which he also does more research on and does more work, which is an incredible luxury, really speaking to how wealthy both Frankenstein's family is and the family and the benefits that he has gotten around him. The creature is interesting because he's not called a monster. Like, commonly in books now, it's called the monster, or in movies, he's called a monster, Frankenstein's monster. But he was a creature, and I think that, given the language that Shelley uses around creatures, it's important that he's called a creature, because humans are called creatures and animals are called creatures. And there are parts where he calls himself monstrous and things like that, but people recognize him as a creature. So he is as much a creature of the world as you or I is, not some sort of unique monstrosity. He also speaks beautifully. He is incredibly eloquent when he speaks, and I would say that he speaks just as eloquently as Frankenstein does himself. He really articulates the suffering that he goes through, and the way that his portion of the story is just an active condemnation of Frankenstein. Every pain that the creature suffers is directly attributable to Frankenstein. And the thing that I also like is that the portion of the story as he's telling it is a stark condemnation of capitalism, jingoism, and xenophobia, just broadly. And it's really well written, and it's a humanist type look at things, and it's really well written. The theme of Frankenstein itself kind of reminds me of a movie with Mikey's video about John Wick. I think it's like the second or third one, where he argues that you did this to you. If you apply that to Frankenstein, every tragedy that befalls Frankenstein or his family is a direct result of his choices. Everything is to pursue the research that he does, to pursue to abandon the creature. Every character that dies, aside from his mother, dies as a direct result of Frankenstein's choices. All the suffering is a result of his choices. And so all Frankenstein's suffering, where he's so dramatic and nearly dies, he did that to himself. It was really interesting, and I thought that was a really fantastic way to... It really shows the complexity of the book itself, the modernness of the book. I thought it was really well done. So the other book that I read recently is called There Is No Antimemetics Division. I didn't really know what to think about it when I picked it up, but as soon as I started reading it, I realized that it was an SCP book. It's its own thing, because SCP is kind of like its own internet meme community. And then in this world, it's called Unknown Organization, while SCP stands for Secure, Contain, and Protect. It's the same idea that there's these unknowns or things that need to be secured, contained, and protect against that are named by specific numbers. And the community is huge. There are thousands and thousands of these SCPs. It's a popular Reddit subreddit, and there's a link to it. There's also a connection with like this modern horror of Backroom and SCP. They're intertwined. They don't always have to be, but they often have become intertwined. And so I'll put an example on the screen here of a really simple SCP, which is a cigarette. And there's a background to it, a description, and I think it's really interesting. And people can vote and say whether they like it or not. I personally think that Mary Shelley would have been a fan of the SCP project. I mean, her book is kind of an encapsulation of it. It's like taking one of these. I personally think two creatures. I'll get back to that in a minute. But at least one of the creatures should have absolutely would be in SCP. And they were created, they're something that the world needs to be protected against. I'm not really well versed about SCP. I've watched a couple like Wendigoon videos or a Jeff Hiett book or video. Here's a link here. He talks about like 6 normal dudes, and it takes him 80 minutes to just go through them all. So there's a lot of depth to these things, and I think that's a lot of fun. Like I said, I think that Frankenstein would have been an SCP because he is the only person in the world that figured out how to create life out of dead parts, how to create these creatures, and that would have classified him as an SCP, or he would have been forced to work at SCP as a creating creatures as a mechanism for constraining things, and the creature would have absolutely been an SCP because it's a unique creature that just was created. Considering the scope of SCP, it's sort of surprising that there hasn't been other books set in this sort of world. I think it's a pretty interesting idea. I guess you could almost argue the X-Files was like a pre-version of this, which we'll get back into that in a second. But the book is basically set in an alternate version of our world with UO and multiple different similar types of unknown organizations throughout the world and in different countries. There's 2 main characters, Marie Quinn and her husband Adam Quinn. Marie is the leader of the Antimemetics Division, and Antimemetics is, if you're familiar with the idea of a meme, it's an idea, and basically a lot of what people are fighting against are memes that are so dangerous that they can cause wild damage to people. And so if you're fighting against that, you're anti-memetic, is that you're creating an idea to fight against another idea. And so you need to come up with a way to destroy an idea so that it doesn't destroy the world. I thought that the author did a pretty good job in introducing people to the world. Quinn walks the reader through her world by walking her boss, who had forgotten about the Anti-Memetic Division, through the whole process, how to remember it, how they control memory, how they intentionally forget certain things, how they make sure they remember other things. So it's a pretty interesting way of helping everybody understand the world. So you don't actually have to have a fish out of the water character. You can have a fish out of water character who becomes a fish in water really quickly, and becomes a major character within the story, which is interesting as the story progresses. The main antagonist is an unknown that, if you know about it, it will hunt you down and kill you. And over time, no matter what safeguards and put into place, U-3125 is always learned about by the human race. You can forget about it and go on living, but eventually, if you've already gone through the process of figuring it out, you're probably going to kind of figure it out again. And this creature is kind of outside our reality. It's incredibly powerful. It's bleeding into our reality, can act in our reality. And so there's a couple different planes of reality, like idea planes and things like that, that are kind of explored lightly in this, and I think they're pretty interesting. Honestly, despite the sections where there's a part where the monster wins, I'm going to spoil that a little bit. But despite the horrors that actually happen because of this U-3125 and what happens in the section, whenever it's kind of driving the world, yeah, there's a horror element there. It's clearly meant to make you feel a little queasy. A lot of it is intentionally redacted, which is part of the way that SCP tells stories, is that they have sections that are redacted if you're not high enough to access those things. But I think that the real horror of this is the loss of memory and the impermanence of the people that are in our lives, and the likelihood that we will forget people that we've known and that we won't even know that we've forgotten them. I know that's not really a major drive of the book, other than with a few of the characters, where it's very intentional that they're treated as if they have dementia or Alzheimer's. But the way that Marie Quinn explains her memory loss and the people that are just missing, like the author Quantum, that's his handle because he writes SCP. It's the same handle that he writes SCPs with. He does a really good job where you're reading a chapter and there's a character in it, and then at the end of that chapter, the main character will have taken something to forget, and then that character who's in that one chapter is never mentioned again. And it's clear that the main character doesn't have any knowledge about that character anymore. And so there's just this emptiness where there should be a sense of loss, and that to me is really horrifying. And so a lot of ways that this is a book that looks at the scientific research and drugs and things to see how they can impact us and change our personalities and things like that. And I think the horrors are somewhat related. The horrors are rooted in science. They're rooted in knowledge, both like the knowledge that you will forget things and the knowledge that if you know something, you will die. And the only way out is an idea that's more powerful. While there is no memetic division, ends on a happier note than Frankenstein. And I honestly didn't like the actual ending after the epilogue. I thought it was better. It was too neat and tidy. It's like the world ended, and once the monster was defeated, everything went back to normal, which, sure, okay, that's how you wanted to write it, just write it that way, that's fine. I think that Frankenstein, though, really, there was major consequences for everyone involved, and I think that felt more thematically correct. I'm kind of torn around the idea of if everything going back to normal is thematically correct, because it just digs into the fact that everyone lost their memory about what happened and they just went back to work. But there's just so much that would have happened that would have made it very difficult. So I don't know. I think that Frankenstein is obviously a better written book. I mean, that's not to say I didn't enjoy the Antimemetics Division. It's just, it's a book of its time. It's written for its audience. in an audience that understands what they're getting into with SCP. It's a quick read. It doesn't really have the depth that Frankenstein has, which is, that's fine. I mean, I don't think this book is going to have the staying power, but I mean, we're talking about a book that has 200 years of staying power versus a book that came out like this year that is about an internet meme that if we had in 200 years from now, who the hell knows if anybody will even know about SCP? How are we going to have the records of SCP? Printing the wiki would be insane. So that kind of gets people into thinking about how what is our cultural memory going to be like, and in that way, just the whole memetic division is kind of wrapped up into that, because you forget all these things. I do think that since there is a movie coming out for the Back Room relatively soonish, I think that there's probably going to be more media around SCP. There's going to be more people looking into that space, especially film and television, because we've kind of seen the die off of comics as being like the dominant cultural force in the US. I think that their film and television are looking for a new thing, and horror is kind of popular. I mean, horror is always popular, but sort of these monstrous type things are pretty popular right now, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see this kind of moving forward. If you read either of these books, please let me know what you think in a comment. I really appreciate your time. Please comment, like, and subscribe. If you think I got something wrong about either of these books, please really let me know. I'd love to have a conversation about this. If you thought that the Antimemetics Division was a god-awful version of SCP, I would really like to hear about that. I know I'm not an expert. I've had fun reading a little bit about SCP, but it's not my space. So really, thank you again for watching, and I really hope you have a good one.